All right, good afternoon. Hello to you all. Welcome to this significant, this momentous occasion. We are very excited to be here with you by means of introduction. My name is Refilwe Nyoni, and I have the privilege of facilitating the conversation here today. So I am not traveling alone. I have some very special guests here with me that I will shortly introduce you to. I represent a very cool organization called Mindful Revolution. We are in the business of mental health, or as we like to call it, mental wealth, right? We are leading the way in building future fit employees and businesses with proven results in supporting the maintenance of mental health in the workplace. Our vision is to foster workplace environments where the human resource feels prioritized. A huge thank you to the team at Mail and Guardian who have made this possible. Wendy, Sean, thank you so much to you and your team. Thank you for the opportunity, the privilege of hosting these important conversations. Also to the team at Mind Revolution, more specifically my colleague Grant Nash, who has helped us to make this possible. Thank you so much, Grant. And to my guests, right? Of course, I've mentioned that I have some special guests, Dr. Lesego Rameti from ABSA Group, Megan Gray representing Mental Wellbeing Partners, and also Steve Teasdale on behalf of Discovery. So I haven't said this in order of importance, Steve, in case you're feeling left out. I was just bringing in the ladies first, so I hope no offense is taken, and I hope you forgive me in advance if any offense has been taken. Now, with our current realities, we are all allocating and spending a significant portion of our lives online due to how the world has operated. We're also spending a significant amount of time trying to balance the demands of our mental well-being. And so to lend context to today's conversation, the world of work has changed, and we know for sure that it will never be the same again. During this period of turbocharged change that we have experienced, that has transpired worldwide, they call change a crisis, turbocharged change. It is crucial that we take a pause and that we plug in to reflect on the challenges that we are facing, both within ourselves, within our organizations, and also without, right? The month of October, the month that we are in, it is globally observed as Mental Health Awareness Month, with the objective of not only educating the public about mental health, but also to reduce the stigma and discrimination that people with mental illnesses are often subjected to. According to the World Health Organization, they say that 15% of working age adults live with a mental disorder. Without effective support, mental disorders and other mental health conditions can affect a person's confidence, they can affect a person's identity at work, their capacity to be productive, and also affects being absent, right? So we're present, but not really present for our demands. And so in order for us to talk about these challenges, I've invited these very special guests with me. So firstly is Dr. Lesego from ABSA Group. She is currently the Group Head of Wellness at ABSA Bank, Doc. We fondly call her Doc, right? She has a vast experience. She's worked in occupational health in the workplace wellness programs, health risk management, comprehensive health strategy, and sustainable development, cutting across the mining and resources industry and also the banking sector. So I know this for sure. She's an avid advocate of healthy and holistic living and well-being across all dimensions. Doc, good afternoon. How are you doing this afternoon?
Good afternoon, Refilwe. I'm in high spirits. Because we did have a session earlier, the two of us, so it has been a jam-packed day, but I'm talking about stuff that I'm passionate about, so I really feel energized. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Awesome. So my follow-up question, Doc, is the topic that we're engaging around today, tackling mental well-being in the workplace. It's a crucial conversation. Why do you believe that this is a crucial conversation?
Look, I think, Refilwe, you've touched on it earlier, that, the World Health Organization, talks about 15% of the population living with a mental health condition. And we do know that, organizations are made up of people, you know. Uh, Also, WHO predicts that by 2030, depression will be the leading cause of disability, surpassing cardiovascular incidents like stroke and heart attacks. But in South Africa, if we bring it closer to home, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group before COVID estimated that 1 in 4 South Africans will develop a mental disorder in their lifetime. And during the COVID, the number was revised up to 2 in 4, so to 50%. And post COVID, that number has now been revised to 2 in 3. So 66% of South Africans will develop a mental disorder in their lifetime. So this is quite staggering. And we know that workplaces are a microcosm of the population where we operate. And if this is the data for South Africa, by extrapolation, this data applies to workplaces. So people are at the core of organizations. And I mean, we all know that without people, we cannot have workplaces. And for any organization to prosper, to thrive, and to attain its aspirational goals, mental health challenges cannot be ignored. An article that was published, in March 2022 by a competitor publication, I will not name it, written by Sanlam Health Solutions, talked about mental health costing the South African economy 200 billion rands every year. This is quite staggering. And these costs can be direct costs or indirect costs. And direct costs are, the cost of seeking healthcare, your doctor's visits, seeing the psychologist, and the cost of medication, seeing the psychiatrist, and in some instances, if you need hospitalization. But for workplaces, we have to think about what these indirect costs are. So there's a huge cost of productivity. You talked about absenteeism, you talked about presenteeism, but also we know that, when people are not at work for a prolonged period of time, there's a cost of rehiring, retraining, but also when employees have undiagnosed and untreated mental health conditions, they might actually exhibit some risky behavior that might cause financial loss to the company. And from this data, it can be concluded that this emerging pandemic cannot be ignored by organizations. So the pandemic has changed fundamentally how we work. The world of work has changed. You've mentioned that, Refilwe, and we've transitioned to the hybrid working model, and home and work actually have become one. And this has added to some of the existing factors that impact on mental well-being. And what are those factors? We have personal factors. We know family predisposition, genetic factors. We live in a country where there's high levels of crime, trauma, it's one of those causes, and substance abuse, both drugs, both illicit and prescription drugs, the use of alcohol, which is something that's very high in South Africa, and also some physical health conditions like cancers for women, giving birth, pregnancy, and all those. But those are not the only causes. If we think about occupational causes as well, excessive workloads, we are in always on culture. There's a blurring of home and work. I've talked about that. In some industries, there are poor work environments, and we're starting to see the increase in burnout, in healthcare workers as well, the risk of severe depression and suicide in young doctors. So all these things are coming to the fore, and we have to think about, as workplaces, what do we do? But we know that there's a buzzword now, ESG. The ESG is becoming a buzzword. Most progressive organizations are looking at their ESG strategies. And I cannot overemphasize the S, the social element of the ESG strategy. You cannot be a sustainable organization if you are deficient, if your strategy is deficient of a comprehensive and robust mental wellness strategy. And it has to look at both the personal and the occupational factors that I've talked about. So I know it's quite a mouthful, Refilwe, but I think it's important to really give you that background and paint the picture.
Well, certainly important to have and to bring in the background, because we are unpacking a very important topic. And to add to the unpacking and to increase our perspectives on this topic, I'm inviting Steve Teasdale, who is currently leading a number of key people portfolios for Discovery Group, where he is accountable for, amongst others, organizational design, the future of work, employee experience, employee wellness, culture, internal communications, transformation, recognition, and also innovation. Steve, I wonder how I do my job often. I wonder how you do your job right now all the time. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you feeling today? And with the recognition that we don't walk into our workplaces just with our professional CVs, as Dr. Lesego has says, right? But we're also people. We have our personal CVs that form part of who we are, our daily stories, our experiences, etc. The world, it has changed, and in some ways it's changed for the better, because we've become more open to hosting and holding conversations like this that are centered around mental health in the workplace. Why do you believe that these conversations are important ones to be having, especially at this time where, as Dr. Lesego has said, we have this new pandemic that we are dealing with?
Thanks so much for the opportunity. And I think that, we can all acknowledge that through conversations, things change. And one of the things which we've probably had to navigate as organizations, but particularly in the context of South Africa and the changes that we've been through, is that difficult conversations often lead to breakthrough moments. And I'm kind of cautiously optimistic that the conversation is heading that way. The danger for me is that I'm sort of a little bit concerned that while it's a bit more acceptable to talk about it, I guess the belief that it's a genuine issue that's new or different or going to have a greater consequence by certain decision makers may not be there. And I think what we have is almost a self-deception or denial on how this may turn around unless we do something. So I guess we've been through this with a number of things over years as society changes, but I'm really hoping that we can capitalize on the logic that in prevention or early detection of challenges, we can help people before they materialize into significant challenges for an individual, families, societies in which they operate in. So I'm particularly keen on the openness that's emerging, because I hope that it's going to enable us to be more comfortable with declaring issues that can then give us better data to predict better responses. And those responses are nuanced and it's quite personalized. So I'm cautiously optimistic about where we are in the conversation. But I guess we've been here before on different topics. And I feel we don't have the time or luxury that we've had with other topics with this particular area. So I guess the narrative that we've got to push here is that this leadership response needs to be at a belief system level rather than an intellectual level.
I love the depth that you've brought in that regard, Steve. I mean, you said that through conversations, things change, but conversations are definitely not enough. You've also said that early detection, it can save lives. We know it through cancer. We know it through, COVID, many different things. But the conversation about cancer, COVID is not what changes what the outcomes can be. It's the actions that are taken that really lead us towards the direction that we want to be headed. So thank you for bringing that in. I think it's a significant one and a great vulnerability to share as a leader yourself, to say that maybe not enough is being done. Thank you so much. I'm excited to also introduce Megan Gray, right? And Megan is passionate about supporting organizations to create ecosystems that enable the employees to thrive in a way that they live and work. She has worked in the field of corporate healthcare and employee well-being for many, many years, 17 years to be exact, and her experience working for an insurance company in the UK, an employee assistance program provider, and then heading up the group portfolio for well-being, a program for the second largest bank in Africa is part of Megan's accolade. So I met Megan many years ago when she was still part of this very big bank. I'm excited to introduce Megan. And Megan, just to say, how are you feeling today, right? We're having very important conversations. Can you tell us why it's important for us to tackle mental well-being? As Steve has said, the conversations are not enough, right? Why is it important that we tackle mental well-being in the workplace? And also, how is it, right? What are the tools? What are some of the ways that your organizations helps capacitate other organizations to step out of conversations, but be capacitated to be able to do a little bit more about it?
Thanks so much, Rafilwe. I'm really excited to be here in the spirit of true transparency. I'm actually also really nervous. So I've got my notes with me just in case, because I've got some really important things I'd like to get across, and they just to keep me on point. I can talk a lot, so I need my notes to not run over time. It's such a privilege to be here, actually, and to be sitting on a panel with this amazing team of people. So thank you very much, and to everyone for making the time to join us. It's such a privilege. So, Rifu, I think for me, it's a really interesting place to be at the moment. And I think that the responsibility for protecting mental well-being as a global phenomenon has become a societal crisis. And the case for tackling mental well-being in the workplace is now actually a business imperative, but it's also become a social responsibility. Thriving employees perform. We all know that. They access creativity and innovation. They have an innate resilience, which is an intellectual capital that all organizations want to harness. So providing an ecosystem that holds supporting employees' well-being at the core of what you're doing, at the core of those engagements, but really doing it genuinely, is the strategy to start to create workplaces and workplace platforms for people to thrive. And I know this sounds a bit too good to be true and a bit twee, but there is a subtle but very significant shift that starts to occur when you design work with the basic principle of caring for people in the way that you do this. So think about any people engagement, right? Think about performance, think about reward, perhaps disciplinary change, job design, any of those things. If you could start architecting process, off the basis of caring for employees, how significantly different that positive impact would be on the individual and the business experience. I think hard business still has to happen. Tough people choices have to occur, but it can be done differently, and it can have such a positive impact on the individuals around them. In addition to the business case for globally, I think for well-being, organizations also have a responsibility to create safe workplaces for people. And I think as times evolve, safety in a workplace now also includes mental well-being and how you look to protect employees' mental well-being in the workplace that you create. I use the word protect because I think it's really important. It actually starts to show the opportunity and the responsibility we have as organizations. I always say we create the jobs. We're the ones who do the job design. We're the ones who build the jobs. And so, my favorite quote, and I'm sure you've probably heard me say this before, if you've ever heard me talk, was from Peter Cheese, who's the head of CIPD in the UK. And he spoke once and said that good work is good for people. And I almost want to take that a step further to say, yes, good work is good for people, done in the right way. And I think as organizations, we have this huge responsibility to design good work and allow it to be done in the right way. The other point to think about is that healthcare and support for mental well-being these days is really expensive. It's hard to access. And it carries with it long waiting times, particularly in the international context. But in South Africa also has a pretext of being slightly elitist. And due to the number of people demanding and looking for support and the huge incidence of mental health that's occurring, I think, Dr. Lesego was speaking about 66% of people are going to experience a mental health crisis. As an organization, we can't rely solely on the medical frameworks and systems in our society. We have to look at the way we support and provide support to our employees. And I think we are tasked with doing this very broadly and very generously. I think it speaks, Lesego was also speaking a lot about your ESG and your social response. And I think that there's a social obligation also to look at how we provide support to the people who work for us and their communities more broadly and as much as you can. We all sit here in uncharted territories. I know a few of us have spoken already about the pandemic and what that's meant and how it's really tipped the world of working on its head. But we have an opportunity to do something quite amazing now. We have an opportunity to think very deeply and very hard about what it is that we're trying to create. Because we are shifting, we are changing the way people are working, and we're looking at crafting a new narrative. And I think, we often are challenged with this notion of purpose and legacy. And actually, as a community of people who are working and creating and shifting and building out of this pandemic that we've just been through, we have an opportunity to create work that's really good for people, work that enhances your well-being and doesn't detract from it. And generations beyond us are going to be very grateful if we can get that right. So just to answer one of your other questions, Refiwe, was around what we do. So I work for one of the organizations I work for is a company called the Mental Wellbeing Partners Program. My co-founder, Ashley Cater, and I started this business because we felt actually that one of the ways to make a really sustained and fundamental difference to people's experiences of world of work was to look at interventions around the how we do things. And so we designed interventions that look at human capital, leaders and executives, and we take them through a journey to look at how they tackle mental well-being in their worlds of work, and particularly look at how people experience well-being at work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. Dr. Lebo, Megan has said some important things. She says that we have to support employees, and also we are changing the way that we do things. We know that healthy workplaces, they promote mental health and mental well-being, and they support the employees on these mental health journeys. Now, I have the privilege of knowing that you're part of the team at APSA that do a great deal of work in this regard. Spoke about a session that we had a little earlier today, another one we had the other day. And, on the topic of psychological safety, which has also become somewhat of a buzzword, right? So we talk about these things, what do they really mean, and how can we really start to enforce them? So what does psychological safety mean? Why is it a crucial component in creating a culture of allowing colleagues to be able to seek help, to seek support, if and when they are experiencing a mental health challenge?
So thanks a lot for that, Refilo. I need to apologize. I'm really struggling with my hay fever. So if you see me patting my eye, it's not because I'm getting emotional. It's because I have a teary eye. So I do apologize for that. So psychological safety, Refilo, is the belief that you will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up. If you have ideas, questions, concerns, or if you make a mistake. So that's really, fundamentally what psychological safety is. But from a mental health point of view, is the belief that if you share, your mental health challenges, you will not be punished, humiliated, or discriminated against, or be stigmatized, for your mental health challenges. But also, it's something that binds teams together. It's a shared belief held by members of a team that, should you share your mental health challenges, you will be supported. You will you'll have you'll be cared for. Your team members will empathize, and they'll be compassionate towards you should you disclose that. So it's really around an understanding that your mental health challenges will not deter you, will not deter your prospects of work, be it from a career progression point of view. If it's a performance discussion, the fact that you were off sick because you were diagnosed with depression or anxiety, that information will be used against you. And we know that if that's the type of environment that you are in, it might also impact you financially from a salary point of view and bonuses. So a psychologically safe environment is one that colleagues feel free to share with their teams and their line managers where they're at, what they're experiencing, without fear, of any repercussions. So it is really important, I think, Refilo, where we find ourselves, that workplaces should, create psychologically safe environments, for individuals. So we know that a psychologically safe environment enhances employee engagement. It really helps team to engage, to work together, to solve problems, to be creative. And I think it's stuff that Megan talked about. It really fosters collaboration. And ultimately, that's how organizations play to win. But what is also important is that in a psychologically safe environment, people feel cared for, people feel supported, and it really starts helping us fight the discrimination and the stigma that's associated with mental health challenges. But more than anything, it saves lives. So when we have a psychologically safe environment, it can save lives, because we know organizations that navigated COVID-19 successfully, leaders, the role of leadership was quite critical. Those are leaders that led from the heart. Those are leaders that led with empathy and care, and that's how they navigated the pandemic. And it's the same type of leadership that's really required to create an environment that is psychologically safe. And I think sharing our stories, Refilo, it's something that enhances psychological safety, because leaders play a very critical role, because they role model, teams look up to them. And you would know that on Monday, as we kickstarted our mental health awareness campaign at ABSA, I shared a very personal story with the team, and I was quite amazed, the feedback that I got. People, started asking, I never thought that doctors would have, mental health challenges. So we start breaking down barriers and people understanding that we are all human. We all have challenges. But what is important is it's okay not to be okay. But what's not okay is you not seeking help. And with that, I've seen stories, I've read emails from many, of our employees sharing similar stories and being encouraged to seek help. And I think that's what is required. We have to start talking the talk and walking the walk, because that's really how we save lives. And I think that's critical. It starts with creating an environment where people feel heard, and they know that by sharing their stories, there are no repercussions for them.
Doc, I mean, that specific Monday, I think, was a hugely exciting one. I think, Steve spoke earlier that the conversations are amazingly great, but the how is what's important. So as a leader, sharing a huge, deeply personal challenge with your colleagues was something that I thought was quite powerful and a really important step towards the how. This is how we get people to talk, by us talking ourselves. So thank you so much for that and for bringing that up here today. Now, Steve, mental health, it is considered by the World Health Organization as a state of well-being in which every individual, they realize their own potential, they can cope with the normal stresses of life and can work productively, fruitfully, and they're able to contribute to their community. I love what Dr. Lesego said, that she said that part of psychological safety is that people feel cared for. Now, I know that's something that you do very well in your department, in your organization. We've done some work with your recognition team, and I read an article in Forbes magazine that talks to us about the importance of recognition, how this is important in the workplace. It talks about how appreciative leaders are appreciated leaders. Now, from a mindfulness neuroscience perspective, being recognized and appreciated is actually really beneficial for mental well-being. This might be something that we might not be aware of, right? So recognition, what happens is that it stimulates the hypothalamus regularly, and it increases what is called dopamine. So dopamine production happens. It affects the plasticity of the brain. So the gray matter of the brain starts forming more, and it also improves the quality of the work and someone's productivity. You do incredible work in terms of recognizing people. Do you think that recognition plays an important role in tackling mental well-being in the workplace? Do you think that is important for people to be acknowledged, not just reprimanded, but also to do it well? I think when something is done well, it has much greater measure and much greater impact. What are your thoughts on this?
So, I mean, fundamentally, recognition is hugely important in behavioral change. And anyone who chases the circles on the Vitality website or on their phone every week will know our logic behind it and the behavioral economics that sits behind it. But in the context of recognition, I think what we've been determined to do is to think about it in the context of those people who are performing incredibly well, and they're doing incredible things. And in our flagship program, which is where we partnered with Mindful Revolution, we particularly focused on a recovery. So just like great athletes and who are delivering extreme results, we know that for them to continue doing that, they needed to recover. So we recognized them with teaching them both some of the tools, so and taking them through some practice, but equally the other part of the program was around resilience and how do we build it, and that can be from the perspective of a number of different approaches, but the one we were used recently is in the context of the growth mindset. So it's a huge part of that particular program in a very structured way. However, I think that recognizing those people that stand up and help others, those people who are brave enough to bring their stories forward, those of us that have the opportunity to make a difference through our leadership role, these are things which we have to recognize and start to recognize, because I guess the narrative we probably have in most corporates is that we recognize those people who in incredibly tough times just keep on doing everything, and they keep on delivering, and but we know secretly in the background, silently, the consequences can be very, very damaging. So recognizing people for wider behaviors, and behaviors that I think sort of Lesego mentioned around leaders who are bringing empathy into the way in which they lead and understanding. These are things which we have to reinforce through recognition. And the sort of the recognition approach we have in Discovery is very, very driven through behavior rather than a specific performance result. And I think that's helping us in some ways to reinforce it and pivot towards a more human-centric perspective on recognition.
Thank you so much, Steve. I mean, such crucial things. I mean, I remember reading something that said that recognition is food for the gods. And I think that in a recognition, people do feel appreciated, but also bringing in that topic of resilience, right? Because when resilience is in overdrive, when it's not balanced, this is also where we start to see those mental well-being challenges starting to emerge, right? Resilience, we say, is not about doing more, but it's about resting before you get tired so that you can capacitate yourself. So all great athletes, they work really hard, but they also rest really hard. So at athletes in the professional world of work, we also need to remember that resilience is about taking important break. It's about nourishing our self-care, and it's also about ensuring that we are taking care of ourselves, because we are the most important resource, not just for our organizations, but also for our families and the people who need us. Now, Megan, we're talking about support systems. We're talking about recognizing people. We're talking about how communities are so important in terms of mental well-being. Now, cultivating and maintaining a support system is a really key component in navigating and maintaining these levels of resilience that we're talking about. Support networks, they're not just fluffy things. They do much more. They offer us a sense of belonging, and when we feel that we can belong, we feel like we've almost got a safety net and we can push a little bit further and know that we are cared for, right? So according to the World Health Organization, they say that more than 300 million people around the world, they suffer from depression, and that this is the leading condition, and it's the leading reason why workers go on disability. Why is it important for people to share their mental health challenges? And also, why do you think people find it difficult to talk about mental health in general? And what can we do about it? So what are some of the ways that we can help open up these conversations and take those steps forward?
Thanks, Rufilwe. So, I mean, I don't mean to be alarmist in the response to this question, but I think if you just take a look around you in the communities we're in and look at the high suicide rates that we see around us, you'll realize, and I think also reflecting on the stats that Lesego shared with us earlier, it is not just important to talk about mental health, it's become a non-negotiable. We have got to find a way to speak about mental well-being. And I'd like to reframe that, you know, Rifa, you spoke about mental health challenges, and I think actually people have to find a narrative and an articulation to speak about how they're feeling and the whole spectrum of their well-being. Early intervention, I know we spoke a little bit earlier, Steve, about early detection. I think early intervention is probably one of the most important things we can do when it comes to mental well-being, because it does save lives, hands down, as simple as that. And I think, when we're reflecting on well-being and why people are so sort of reluctant to talk about well-being, I think the implications of stigma and shame have probably been spoken about quite a lot before. But I think one of the challenges we haven't faced really is language. And I think, some cultures don't even have a language to speak about mental distress. But deeper than that also is around using the words that people can hear, so that when you are speaking, the people who are hearing you understand what you're saying. Now, I remember when I first started working in this field, the word stress had a huge amount of, would require a huge response from us as health professionals, because it meant that you were in distress. Whereas now it's a word that gets bandied about so regularly that I can say I'm feeling stressed because I'm going to a party on the weekend and I don't have a dress. But I can also say that I'm stressed because I don't know how I'm going to feed my family this week. And I think that those same words mean such different things to people that the stories become critical around that. And I think both Steve and Lesego have spoken about the importance of storytelling. And I think that for me is a critical thing. I'm a parent of 3 kids, and I've personally had a significant journey around burnout and anxiety. And I think one of the things that's been, really interesting for me as I'm now parenting my child with attention problems is how important the narrative and the stories are that we tell our kids. We've got so many friends who talk about giving their children vitamins, right? And I am not like that. I think we need to talk about the things we're doing, because there's no shame in needing help. And I think that, you asked me, Rafilwe, what we can start to do around how we change this. And I think it's about having the courage and the bravery to talk the stories and share, and use language and teach people around us about the languages that they can use to get the help that they need. I learned about something called emotional literacy quite recently. And that for me was a total surprise. I should have learned about it a long time ago in my career. But I think during my own therapy journey and in my world of work, I think giving people language and narrative in order to enable them to get support is critical. So reflecting on what we can do, for me, it starts with us. I think we've spoken a lot already about the importance of self-awareness, self-reflection, taking care of yourself, the willingness of being able to share your journeys, and the willingness to role model, because I think many people in leadership positions are frightened of sharing their stories. And actually that huge impactful opportunity to role model the prioritizing your well-being and the permission that gives other people to take care of their well-being is critical. I think for me, it requires courage and bravery. I think, Steve, you spoke a little bit about this, but I think it's hard to stand up and tell your story. It's hard to say the words of the things that have happened to you. But actually, to know that stepping up and speaking out could possibly be the helping hand that somebody else needs is enough to hopefully get people to start speaking about their mental well-being. Thanks, Rafilwe.
Thank you so much, Megan. And I think that storytelling is absolutely so powerful, because in sharing our own stories, we give others permission to do the same. And, Steve, we were talking about resilience, we're talking about balance, and I want to talk a little bit about work-life balance, work-life harmony. It's called many different things these days, work-life integration. And according to UC Berkeley's High School of Business, they call it, and they describe it as an approach that creates more synergy between all of our areas of life. So whether that's our work, our home, our family, our community needs, our well-being, our health, work-life harmony is an important aspect of healthy work environments, because it is centered around our ability to set healthy boundaries, right? To define the limits that we need to set in order to protect what is important in our lives. And I know that sometimes for all of us, it can be quite blurry, because work is significantly important, but our home lives are also equally important. And by not clarifying and maintaining these healthy boundaries, we're not really doing anyone any favors. So we are navigating these ever-changing landscapes. We know for sure, if we weren't sure before, change is the only constant. We know this for sure now. And as we're navigating these changes, there's so many impacts that happen. We are affected in our inner world, our emotions, our mental health. We're in turmoil. So many things happen. What do you think is the importance of successfully integrating our home and our work lives, and what are some of the ways that we can do better at this? So what are some of the ways, tools that you can share with us with creating more harmony between the people that require us professionally and also the people that require us personally, and those people personally including ourselves?
I mean, I think we took a huge step forward in this space, and a step backwards actually during COVID, because my answer is really around understanding others. Understanding yourself obviously is important, as has been, well, the most important thing. But if you're a leader, I think the importance of sitting down and understanding how life rolls out for you and what gives you energy and what takes away energy is incredibly important. Because what I've learned is that we think we know that if we create the boundaries for people, that they will be less challenged from stress or whatever. What I learned was that some people genuinely get energy from mixing in a crazy way their life and work, and others really can't. So you have to be quite personalized in the way that you lead and the way that you respond to this one. It's not as, I suppose, as straightforward as create the after 5 o'clock it's all over. Those sorts of things. There's different kinds of people need different things. However, I think there is a responsibility on leaders also to probably not always absorb what an individual is saying to you as the gospel truth, because they've got societal desirability aspects that are built into what they're saying to you. So they say, no, contact me anytime. But if you know that they are, their kids they're on holiday with their kids or whatever it is, or they're going away, or they've got a very, big family event, you've got to respond. So I don't think it's changed that much over the years. I guess the opportunity, particularly if they are challenging themselves to be more integrated between work and life, is to help them navigate it, because I guess we're going to get it wrong many times, and that it's important to have those conversations. So if you started every single one-on-one conversation, which hopefully as leaders we do regularly, we ask, how are you integrating your life and work? I mean, how's it going? Is it working out? If you had to rate it, how would you rate it out of 10? Somebody says it's a 7. You say, how do you get it to a 10? Those are the sort of things, practical things that I think we should do as leaders. But I do think this is a big leadership job for us. But it really does take a lot of effort to integrate yourself into somebody else's world and help them navigate it. But it pays off in the long run, I think.
Absolutely, Steve. I think it does pay off in the long run. And as a leader yourself, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the ways that you sanitize your sanity? So what are some of the well-being strategies that you adopt in your own life to aid yourself to balance out those levels of resilience?
So I fail a lot, but I one area of success for me for many years now has been the power of meditation, and the ability to go into a space of nothingness in the most stressful moments and the most quiet moments. So I found that to be a massive help for me. I also think I know how I recharge my batteries. And I think that what I do is try and create those opportunities to kind of get those experiences that give me a lot of energy to come back and do more. Where I fail is on aspects of physical health. We know that the relationship between physical health and mental health is clear, and I guess that what you need to try and do is give that responsibility and the pressure onto some of your those people who influence you to kind of push you along that direction, so you can laugh together and get to a place where it's more holistic, more balanced.
I love it because I'm also a huge fan of meditation. In fact, I feel like that's what I do all day. Thank you for sharing your well-being strategy with us, Steve. Megan, we've heard it from Steve. So he shared one of his tools of sanitizing his sanity as a subject matter resource, an expert. I love being called an expert, so I hope you do too. Please share some tools and strategies that we can put into play to better tackle mental well-being more specifically in the workplace. What are some of the things that organizations should be doing, especially in the South African context? How do we support ourselves, our colleagues, to manage ourselves, our mental well-being? But before I ask you to answer, Megan, I just want to send a shout out to our participants, our audience today. Please do ask us some questions. We have about 12 minutes left of this webinar. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions that you would like to pose to Dr. L, to Megan, and to Steve, please share them, and we'd be happy to answer those. Megan, over to you.
Thanks, Rafilwe. So I'm going to start by answering the question, what should organizations do? And I think from my perspective, I would start with a review of what you're currently doing. I think people traditionally spend a lot of time and energy and money throwing things at mental health at workplaces and hope that it works. And I think that often you need to define what is really adding value and what is just ticking the box. So resources are finite. So everything you need to do needs to move the needle. Mental well-being in workplaces is protected through an ecosystem approach. And so it's not just one thing. It's going to be a series of things together that are interlinked and have subtle shifts that make a sustained impact. I know that, Steve, you spoke about leadership and the role leadership play in well-being. And I think Ashley and I have actually built a framework, which we're very happy to share with anybody who would like it. I'll pop our emails in the chat just now. And please feel free in any way to contact us to talk about this or to give you the framework. But it essentially has 4 facets. So the first is around leadership. And I think that you need to go and look at your leadership offerings, what you're putting in place, how you're enabling and empowering your leaders. We believe fundamentally that your C-suite are your influencers, are your shapers of your mental well-being strategy. Your human capital are your influencers, and your line managers are actually the implementers of your well-being strategy. And that's quite a different facet, quite a different shift to the way things are done at the moment in organizations. It's around really enabling your line managers to perform and deliver and implement the well-being strategy in your organization. And the next facet for us is looking at team cohesiveness, team cohesion, and the role of champions and connection. And I think often people don't unpack that team element properly, and particularly with remote working, and particularly with the shift in dynamics in an organization, that requires a huge amount of unpacking. And the third is workplace ecosystem, and it's probably the most fun for me because it's looking at what system you have in place in your organization and how each of those elements of your system enable well-being and enable mental well-being. It's looking at policies, infrastructure, IT, the whole system, the whole ecosystem that you have in your workplace, and how that's enabling of the individuals who are working there. Because actually the biggest way to influence this is to look at how you do work and how it influences people. And I think that that's really important to integrate it into the way you do things. And the last one speaks about individual support. This is the bit that in employee wellbeing programs always takes a bad rap. It's the frills, it's the fuss, it's the things people don't think add value. And I would argue against that totally. I think for me, it's the EAP that helps a person in a crisis. It's the mental wellbeing journeys you go on that build connection and community. It's the on-site support that enables early intervention. It's about giving common language, narrative. It's breaking down stigma and making mental health care more accessible. So for me, I would start by saying, look at what you do, look at what you offer, and start to unpack what is adding value, what can you change and tweak to make it really meaningful, and how do you integrate caring for your people into every single touch point in your human capital EVP. To answer the question quickly on resources, we're very privileged in the private sector in South Africa to have a very agile and diverse response offering. And when planning your interventions, I would encourage you to think about 3 things. One is that you need to make sure that your interventions access the 3 levels of support. So it has to be stuff that shifts the culture, that has a big sustained systemic impact. It's also targeting the groups of people like human capital and line managers that can make and own the change. And then it's also around supporting individual employees on their journey from surviving all the way through to thriving, to get the best out of your employees and to really support their well-being in a workplace. Rafael, I know we're short on time, so I went as fast as I could through that answer. I hope that was good enough high-level overview.
Great, it was great enough, better than good enough. And in fact, you have answered the question from Nkuseli Madiba, who says, if there is no self-care or wellness plan or program in an organization, how do we start one? So I think you've been able to help us unpack a little bit of that. Nkuseli, you can also reach out to us and we can assist you in this process because, as I say, there are people who are really good at helping organizations to do this. Thank you so much. Dr. Al, we have another question from Kuseli, which I would like to ask you rather, to help us unpack. And he's asking, how do you initiate the conversations around mental health without being targeted by your employer?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Refilo, and thanks to Nkuseli for that question. So this is a difficult one because what is important is you need a conducive environment, to come forward with something as personal as this. And I think, even for us as an organization, we are on a journey where we want to create the environment where people can come forward and, and access the support and care that's available to them. So I think my advice would be for Kuseli to identify, a leader or a line manager that they have engaged with previously and they have established a working relationship. So this is something that's quite important because you will be making yourself vulnerable. So you have to really do that with a trusted leader that you've engaged with previously, because you do not want to go to somebody who is not well equipped to deal with that. In most instances, the people, community or HR or human capital, I don't know what you call it in your organization, that should actually be your first port of call, because in most instances, HR is better equipped to deal with some of these challenges. But I wouldn't encourage you, to do it if it's something that's not part of the company culture, because it might have, unintended consequences for yourself. So that would be my advice. But I know it's not helping you much because I also do not know which organization you work for. But I think for me would be start small, identify a trusted individual, a line leader or HR, and see how you can advance with that conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Al. I have one more question for you before I let you go to your other priorities, because I know you have many. We've been talking quite a lot recently about the theme of a post-traumatic wisdom, which is a concept that I'm in love with at the moment. And according to the psychiatrist Bruce Perry, he says post-traumatic wisdom relates to the experiences where we've been able to get through adversity, and we're now in a safe space in our lives where we can reflect, we can look back and unpack our learnings and see the world differently, right? So we have seemingly emerged from one pandemic, we're in another. It's been a tough time for all of us. It continues to be. Can you share some of your post-traumatic wisdom insights as it relates to tackling mental well-being in the workplace? So how have you been able to make the most of the learnings to better assist colleagues on their individual and respective well-being journeys?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Refilo. So I'm going to read a WhatsApp that I received, on Monday after the session that we held at ABSA. And it says, it's one of our employees. She says to me, it takes courage to relate your story. We always think that we are the only ones with challenges and you have everything put together. Thank you for sharing. We all have stories to share. And I think for me, it was quite a profound moment because, I had not even, that was not the plan that I was going to share my story on Monday. And I think when you start receiving this type of feedback, you realize that, as a leader, your voice actually carries a lot of weight. It can impact people positively. And I think it's for that reason that, our learnings, when we go through adversity, how we overcome, it can give the next person hope that, wherever they are, they can also overcome. But more than anything, fundamentally, I'm a healthcare professional. I went into medicine because I wanted to save lives. And our stories actually save lives. That's the power that lives in the stories. And it's important for us to share those stories, because for somebody that just might be the moment where they see the light and a life is saved. So I really think it's important for all of us, to start sharing our stories, because stories do save lives. Thanks. Back to you, Refilwe.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Doc. So I'm going to share one of my favorite quotes from a story, and it's an African proverb that says, "Be wary when a naked man offers you a shirt." So very simply put, we can't give what we don't have. So in caring for others, we must be able to care for ourselves first, so that we are giving what we have got. Steve, I'm going to ask you to come in here. What is your favorite quote, actually? What does it mean to you, and how does it aid your levels of resilience on those days when you're not feeling maybe not quite so amazing?
Sure. I mean, I've got many favorite quotes. They stick to times in my life, but the one that seems to be prevalent always is from Martin Luther King, which is, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." And I think what it does for me is it recognizes the duality of some of these things, and somehow we have to navigate the soft and the hard in our lives. So giving love sometimes isn't the easiest thing, and giving love to ourselves sometimes is not easy. And you need extreme power to kind of pull that off. So that's why it keeps me going, if you will.
Amazing. It sounds like total balance, right? The best of times, the worst of times, acknowledging and accepting both of those. Megan, we have 1 minute left. I'm going to ask for some final words from you, please.
So I think, it'll be really quick. I think for me, probably my favorite quote, and the thing I hold tight in everything I do, is, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And it's not from anyone hugely, well, it's from the book Who Moved My Cheese, which I love, but I know that's controversial, but yeah, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I think the courage needed to change the trajectory of mental well-being in our society is going to require courage from all of us, whatever world it is, whether it's in your role in your family, parenting, work, whatever it might be. I think we have to take courage and do things differently. So that would be my last thought for the day is, what would you do if you weren't afraid?
Amazing. So a courageous quote to end a courageous conversation. Colleagues, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the privilege of your audience. Megan, Dr. Lesego, Steve, thank you so much for holding space around this important topic, tackling mental well-being in the workplace, these important conversations. And hopefully we can move from the conversation part of it and start seeing and feeling real impact in this regard. This is where we are going to wrap up for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Find us on LinkedIn. We're Mind for Evolution. Dr. Lesego from APSA, Steve Teasdale from Discovery, Megan Gray from A Future Shift. We would love to be in contact with you. But thank you so much, and goodbye for now.
Plato said, "Who will guard the guardians? Who are our guardians? Do they care about us? Are they accountable for their actions, or are they above the law? Who elects these guardians? Us? Them? Someone else? And if they guard us, who will guard them? Who will guard the guardians? The Malin Guardian."